So the Pz VII fairly recently received a pretty substantial buff, but how does the rest of the line compare? And is it worth grinding all the way down, now that it's top of the tree especially, to get the Pz VII? Starting out at tier 5 with the Pz IV-H. Now this vehicle is a little bit of a fan favourite, and with good reason. It's just fun to play. Realistically, you get the choice of 2 different guns. Obviously not the stock gun, but you get the choice of the standard, kind of normal firing, not really any frills about it, just a solid reliable gun, and then you get the derp gun, where a lot of people enjoy playing this tank and one-shotting some lower tier light tanks. But let's start out by just talking about the gun that I would say a lot of people would use just to go through the tank, and if they then feel like they want to enjoy the tank a little bit more, then they might go ahead and unlock this. It costs only 3,800. Most people will just get it, and I'd advise that you do get it just because it's fun. But speaking about this gun for a moment, you have 110 alpha and 110 pen for the standard rounds. For the premium rounds, that goes up to 158 pen, and then for the HE, 175 alpha with 38 pen. Again, the HE rounds are a little bit of a letdown. I just wouldn't even bother loading any unless you're trying to clear some bushes or something like that. Dispersion is fine for a tier 5 tank, and aim time, again, is actually pretty decent for a tier 5 tank. But the reason why everybody likes this tank is mainly because of this thing. And to explain this tank a little bit more, we'll head over TanksGG to show you everything. The reason why people love this gun so much is the choice of ammunition. By default, the AP round has 64 pen and 350 alpha, which doesn't really seem that great. But if you have a look at the HE round, this is why people play the tank. It has 53 pen, which is very, very similar to the AP pen, but then 410 alpha, a very big increase in alpha damage. So the vast majority of people are going to be running around with this tank and why it's called a derp gun. And for those of you who don't know what a derp gun is, it's basically a gun that has very, very, very bad accuracy, usually has very, very high alpha damage with quite low pen, unless you use, say, like the heat rounds on this. So that's what people use. They'll put on the HE round, they get 410 alpha, 53 pen, and they'll just slap someone for 410 alpha on like a light tank or something. And if they need to, they can then go and play with the heat rounds, which has 104 pen. When the time calls for it, they can go up close and then deal a lot of damage. It will go down in the DPM because of the alpha damage decrease to only 350, but you have 104 pen there, ready for any unsuspecting victims, let's say. So let's just put the HE gun on for setting this tank up. As you can see, you have a 40 km/h top speed, which is more than enough for a medium tank of this tier, and it goes absolutely fine across all terrain types that you would need. Obviously, soft, we don't really worry about. 350 meters view range, which is actually not bad for this tier. If you put on, say, optics with food, then that will go up to quite a large amount. And let's just put on that right now. So for this sort of tank, I'd want optics, rammer, and then I would want vents, and then that will go up to 339 meters view range, and that's without any perks. If you did go ahead and put perks on, 425. Not everybody's going to be using food at this tier, but if you were, 445 meters view range, you have a lot of DPM, because obviously that's just decreased your reload time. And yeah, this is just a mental tank. You see why a lot of people like this vehicle. It's just a fun tank to play. One thing I will say though, it definitely does not have armor, because yeah, this is actually all an overmatch. So what I would say is if you do meet one of these tanks, it might be worth taking a little bit of AP just to overmatch them, because pretty much anywhere you shoot, you'll overmatch. Even through the side here, you'll go straight through the spaced armor and then an overmatch. Obviously you can fire the HE rounds at it, and yes, you do have a chance of penning, but there's also a chance of hitting other stuff that wouldn't pen. Or you just fire heat rounds and just go straight through it as well. That's an option. And so to give this tank a rating, this is easy, like a 8 or a 9 out of 10. I'll say 8 because it's not going to be for everybody, but this is easily an 8 out of 10. It's a lovely tank to play. For tier 6, we have the VK3001P. And this tank, again, is a pretty big fan favorite, actually. If you ever used to play tournaments back in the day, and they still do tournaments now for tier 6, but this used to be one of the best tanks to just play with in a tournament, because it was fast, it had good mobility with power to weight, not only with the top speed, but it had decent armor, a good gun, and good hit points. So it had a very, very good combination of everything, and it was one of the best tanks to choose if you were going to one-on-one someone in tier 6. This is a pretty good tank. I mean, look at it as well. It looks nice. Like, all of these tanks so far have just looked beautiful. And this tank really does prepare you for moving up to the Tiger P. Well, at least in looks it does. Maybe nothing else, but you'll see what I mean. Speaking about the gun of this vehicle, 220 Alpha, 145 standard pen, 194 premium pen. That is what everybody would be using in tournaments. They'll just load premium, 194 pen, 220 alpha, straight through your face. Combine that with very, very good accuracy, a good enough aim time, and very nice DPM, and the reload time at sub 7 seconds. Once you get all the equipment on it as well, it's even less. It's just a lovely gun to play with. So I mean, for this sort of tank, I'd want to have hardening on this for definite, then a rammer, and then probably a turbo, if we're being honest, although it does go fast enough. So probably for randoms, I'd probably want vents more than that. So I think that this will be the best option. If you do get field mods, which, let's be honest, you won't get if you're just going to be grinding it, but you can choose the right-hand side, and then your track health goes up a lot. Ignore this. This is not worth the track health loss that you would have if you didn't choose this. But with this means that most people that you meet will not track you in the first shot, especially light tanks and stuff like that. And even heavy tanks, they're going to need to have this much alpha damage, basically, to track you in one shot. But let's just take off all the field mods, because that is pretty irrelevant for what we're showing today. If you were to go ahead and use chocolate, this would then increase everything like so, and you have 0.34 dispersion, 2.3k DPM, a very, very good reload time at 5.57, and a good aiming time at 2 seconds. Combine that with nearly 400 meters view range and 1,200 hit points. It's just such a nice, comfy tank to play with. And honestly, it's one of the best tanks that you could learn how to do the heavium kind of role in World of Tanks, where it's kind of like a heavy medium tank. I believe this used to be a medium tank. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I think that this used to be a heavy tank that then, or a medium tank that then got transitioned into a heavy tank when some of the tech tree stuff changed. Someone will remind me in the comments whether or not that's true, so check down there, I guess. But either way, this tank is a very good candidate to try and learn that role. When we're going to have a look at the armor, you'll see that it doesn't look that great. However, if you do go hold down and you start to wiggle and you start to be annoying for the enemy, if they try to pen this, it just won't pen. Like, this is a very, very hard turret to just outright pen. You would have to go below it, which at this tier, the guns aren't pinpoint accurate and they'll probably go higher. So again, there's an easy bounce right there. But it's 160 to 200 and so millimeters of armor that you're going to need to go through. However, be warned, you can go through the roof with anything larger than a 75 millimeter caliber gun. So itself included, you can overmatch the roof, which means that if you go and try and hit the cupola and it goes a bit low, the chances are you're probably just going to pen it anyway because it hits the roof. But beginning with this tank is something that you need to take note of, and that is the side of this vehicle. When you go side on like so, this becomes very flat and easy to pen. And if we go back to the hybrid or the visual model here, you'll see what I mean. This bit here, as it's curved in outwards, it's good for when you're up like this and they can't really pen this because it's a bit more of a steep angle. But as soon as you go like this to try and side scrape or something, it doesn't work. This tank can't side scrape. There's no point trying to do it. So just don't bother with that. Your main goal with this tank is to go around the map, get into a position, go hold down, and just try and play around that area that you get to. So be annoying for the enemy, be fast, and just put your shells in with your DPM. So what do I rate this vehicle out of 10? 8. Again, this is a great tank. I wouldn't go any higher than that, purely for the fact that it does have a little bit of a skill cap to try and learn how to play it properly, especially with the lackluster armor on the hull. But if you go hold down and they don't manage to hit the cupola, it's just a solid tank. Moving up to the Tiger P at tier 7, this is not so much of a lovely tank to play for a lot of people. Now, the problem with this tank is that it doesn't really have armor, which we'll go into in a second once we go into Tank GG again. However, there is one thing on this tank which is just so good. Well, in fact, there's kind of two things on this tank which are so good. One is the gun, which is legendary, and two is the hit points. It gets a lot of hit points. 1,500 for a tier 7. Speaking about the gun though, 240 alpha, 203 standard pen, 237 premium pen. You can pen more than enough for what you need to be looking at. Obviously in +2, that's going to be a problem, but that's, again, like more of a problem with +2 than it is with the tank itself. So for whatever your tier is, this is more than enough. You get excellent dispersion at 100 meters. The aim time is completely horrible, I won't lie to you, and the DPM is not that great, especially considering you've just come from a tank that had more DPM. So it's a little bit weird in that regard. But another thing which is super annoying with this tank is that it goes at 35 kilometers an hour, which is very slow. Let's just put it that way. And not only that, but you get 12 reverse speed, which is like a slug. And then to really rub salt in the wounds again, you go at 11.5 power to weight, which is just a massive disparity from what you were just playing a tier below. So not only do you not have a very good top speed, but you also don't have very good effective top speed either, with the terrain distances being quite bad. So this thing really is just very slow. And even if you go ahead, you max it out, and let's say that you go ahead, you do rammer, you do turbo, and you do hardening. You go at 39, which isn't bad, don't get me wrong, right? But you're really going to want to have food, because if you don't have food, your effective top speed goes down from 38 to then to 36. And you're never going to see that 39 top speed. And then for the medium, it goes all the way down to 33, which is mostly just grass and stuff like that. So it's just a shame, really, coming from a tank that's been really, really good to then this thing, which is really, really slow. But we'll put food back on just for this comparison. You do have 2,300 DPM, which again isn't very much, especially considering that your last tank had more than that. Your reload time is 6.2, which isn't too bad. And your dispersion has gone down to 0.31, which is really, really good. Aim time, however, 2.6, which isn't very good. You have 430 meters view range nearly, and you do actually have some decent camo for a heavy tank, surprisingly. But the top speed really is one of the biggest issues on this tank. And I say one of the biggest issues because if you remember at the start when I was talking about this thing, we spoke about the armor. If we have a look at the armor, you'll see that I have the visual model up. And that is because you'll see that this has the same curved effect armor right there. So that means that when it's head on, that curved bit is a lot harder to pen. No, your effective armor is 115 there. The sides of this tank suffer so badly in this tank. It doesn't even matter if you're side on like this or head on like this. You could even be at some ridiculous angle like this, and they could still pen that side of the tank. I mean, fair enough, you need 180 to go through that, and a lot of tanks below you won't have that, but most tier 7s would have that. And that really, really good turret that we spoke about before, where it was about 160, this has gone up to about 210 here right next to the gun either side. But 210 is very easy to pen for anything above you, especially if they have APCR or something like that. They will go straight through this. And not only is your cupola now even easier to hit, your roof is still an overmatch for anything above 75mm guns. So yes, this armor isn't great, is it? It's really not. Yeah, I don't really know what else to tell you. It's a real big letdown in the armor department. It does have armor against lower tier tanks, and you can bully people at mid kind of ranges, but up close this tank has nothing. So to give this tank a rating, this is going to have a 5 out of 10. The only reason why it's not less than this is because of the gun. The gun is so good, and you can trade your hit points effectively because of the amount that you have. I would say that this is probably one of the worst tanks in the line. Maybe, do you know what? It probably is the worst tank in this line, but it's not completely useless. The gun will be hopefully treating you okay. At tier 8, we have the VK4502A. Now this, I don't really want to say recently because it wasn't really that recent, but somewhat recently, got a buff. And with that buff, it went from being the laughingstock of tier 8, like along with, I wouldn't say that it was down at the AMX65T level, but it was around that area, to then being very dominant at tier 8. This gun is sensational. 320 alpha, 200 pen, 244 premium pen, which is the only real downside of this tank, and then 60 HE with 420 alpha. That, in a combination, is beautiful. As I said, the 244 premium pen is a little bit of a letdown. You're not really gaining much more pen from what you had at the Tiger P, and now you're a full tier above. It's kind of a little bit of a letdown that you don't get more pen. However, you don't really need it, because obviously when it's fighting tier 10, nothing is going to do well in tier 10 in a tier 8 game. Okay, it's just not going to happen. But this tank is just so good at dishing out damage and pulling back behind cover, using its armor. It's just so good at being a heavy tank that it doesn't matter too much about the little bit lackluster pen. You have 0.35 accuracy base, very good DPM, and a 2-second aim time. This is just a lovely gun to play with. And I mean, look at it. It looks amazing. I think this is probably one of the nicer looking tanks in the game. And even though that you only go at 38 top speed and your reverse speed is fine, but I wouldn't say rapid by any means, once you actually get this tank set up, which you can use the god tier setup of HP Turbo Rammer, you then go at 42 km/h. You have decent track health, you have good hit points. Much like the Tiger P at tier 7, your hit points have gone up, but only by 100 this time. So your hit points are definitely not as good as what the Tiger P's is, but they're very healthy still. And if we go ahead and put on the cruise skills and then put on chocolate, you have 2.6k DPM, nearly 2.7. You have an amazing accuracy, amazing aim time, reload time is good. It's just great. This tank is just phenomenal to play. And you have 440 meters view range, which is more than enough. Not to mention that if you did get field mods on this tank, you can pick the right hand field mod and choose extra track health, which means that you're near that 400 track health, and anything within your own tier shouldn't really track you in one shot besides higher alpha damage guns. But as I said, field mods, not really for this video. If we go and have a look at the armor, it's mental. It is absolutely insane how good this armor is. And you may be thinking that in the visual model, you saw this kind of lip here. That's not armor. That is not anything. You cannot get penned through this little lip that goes up once you reach the end of your upper hull. That is just that's like a nothing. It's just spaced armor there. So if you have standard rounds of around about 200 pen, good luck hitting this thing when it's hull down, because it's not going to happen. You cannot pen it. If that thing is fully hull down, using all its gun depression, which it gets 8 degrees by the way, you're in trouble. However, if you were to use premium rounds, it still is a massive issue because the turret face is 260mm thick, and the upper hull, you're never going to pen that no matter what tank you're in. But on flat ground, you may be able to go straight through it. So be warned, if you are on flat ground, you can go straight through that hole. And also, the turret cheeks is only 255mm thick, but that is a very hard thing to go through at tier 8. Because most tanks only have around about 250 premium pen. And the cupola is also just, I don't even know. Like that is a tiny cupola to hit. You might as well not even aim for this cupola. Even if you're using heat rounds, this is not an easy cupola to hit. However, if you are using heat rounds, go through this big old forehead. If we have a look, this forehead is super easy to pen if you are using heat. If we go ahead and put on the 112, for example, and use heat rounds, and then we go back to the live model, you'll see it can go straight through the forehead because it is massive, just like mine. Not only that, but yeah, your armor kind of does fall apart against heat rounds. It's even 250 heat. If you have more than that, this tank's in for a real big, like, hard time. And one thing that I actually just realized, because I just went back to AP on this tank, you can actually overmatch the forehead as well if you have anything more than a 120 caliber gun. So you could just fire AP at it and go through it every time as well. Another thing that you can overmatch is if it is side scraping, and you can go straight through here. That is only 20mm thick. So that means that if you have a greater than 60 caliber gun, you're going straight through that, which basically everything that you're going to meet will have. So if it is trying to side scrape, go and pen it right here. You can basically just go and aim for the track and you'll pen it. Also, if it's rocking up and down, you can then go ahead under the tracks right there. That is one of my best things to do. If I meet someone who's starting to like bounce up and down, going forwards and backwards, I just load AP. If I can overmatch it, it's great. They mold, it's amazing. But to give this tank a rating, this is like a 9 out of 10. This is a fabulous tank. I love this thing. It's just so good. Like I'm so glad that this was buffed to a state where it's not OP, because you can definitely still kill it. and it has its downsides, but it's just fun to play and nice to use. It's not too bad to deal with, but it's still fun to play. So yeah, like a 9 out of 10. That's a lovely vehicle. For tier 9, we have the VK4502B, and this thing is amazing. I don't care what anybody says. This tank is amazing to play with because it will teach you how to side scrape so well. If you want to learn how to side scrape in a vehicle, this is the tank to learn it in, and the 705 or 705A. But if you want a German tank, this is the one to learn it in, okay? Once you get to this tier, you get access to a gun which is just beautiful to use. It's exactly the same gun that you get on the Maus and the Mauschen, where it's 490 Alpha, 246 standard pen, and 311 premium pen. You do have HE pen of 65, which is honestly not that great, but okay for the vast amount of tanks that you want to fire HE at, with 630 Alpha. So you can do a lot of damage with that HE round if you do pen. Now, the dispersion is not great, and the aim time is not great, but you would expect that considering that you're getting a pretty big Alpha damage increase. So DPM, again, is slightly down, but not non-existent DPM either. And again, I think that this is one of the best looking tanks in the game. It's just such a nice, it just screams aggression, you know? It just looks aggressive. And as I said, it is a really, really nice tank to learn how to side scrape. But obviously there are a few downsides to this tank, and that is, majority of the time, the speed. It goes up 30, which it's not that fast. It's really not. But as I've already said, if you do the good old HP Turbo Rammer, which you can do, I got away with it absolutely fine when I was playing it earlier. It's lovely. It goes at 34. It's not super fast. It'd be nice if you could put bounty on it, because if you can put bounty on it, you then go at 35, which is a lot better, obviously, and you get better power to weight as well, being bounty. But it also then boosts up that reverse speed. By default is 15, so it's actually one less than the previous tank. So this is quite annoying reverse speed, because if you go any lower than that, you really do feel like a slug. 18 in reverse, 35 forwards, and you get lovely hit points at 2,150. You also get a really, really nice track health at 412, which means that anything lower than that in alpha damage won't be able to track you in one shot. And if we go ahead and put on all the crew skills quickly, this is what it will look like, where we have 2,300 DPM. Again, this isn't great. However, you have the alpha damage to trade effectively with people. And that's something that you need to take into consideration. DPM isn't everything. If you have the alpha to out-trade people, that's what's important. Because if you're firing one-on-one with someone and you can hide, side scrape, and then just peek out, shoot, so you're shooting on reload, but the other person who has more DPM than you is also shooting, but only when you're on reload, then you're going to come out on top if you have the higher alpha than him. You also get 0.33 dispersion, 2.3 second aim time. It's just a good tank, okay? This is just a good tank overall to learn about side scraping and brawling in general. 452 meters view range as well, and it doesn't actually get that bad camo, surprisingly. The only thing that is really a bit of a problem is obviously the penetration being at tier 9, although 246 standard pen isn't awful for a tier 9 tank. It would be pretty awful if it's a tier 10 tank, but at tier 9 it's a little bit more forgiving because most of the time you should be fighting your own tier, so it's not too bad. You also have 311 premium pen, which again, it's not awful, it's not amazing, but it sits somewhere in the middle. And then the reason why this tank is so good at side scraping, look at it. If you want to learn how to side scrape, you go like this, you get an angle with your gun where you just go over the first track wheel, and that is good luck to the enemy team, because that's not happening. Even if they fire APCR, they're not penning you in the side. They're just not. You don't have this this overmatch underneath the track either. You do have one there, but they can't see it because of the angle that it's at. So it's not, and this isn't even an overmatch. This is 50 mil, and then you've got space armor as well. That's nothing to worry about. You shouldn't really get penned there unless you are rocking backwards and forwards. So this is really, really good to learn how to side scrape. And look at the turret as well. Everywhere on this turret is basically an auto ricochet. This is against 311 APCR, apart from the turret face, which is around about 270-ish pen that you're going to need. So obviously, yes, if they have high pen, they'll go straight through your turret cheeks. But Against people that are firing AP, that's not happening. Like, the only way that they're penning you is if they manage to somehow, you can see, go into your turret ring there, which is like a tiny pixel being able to shoot there, or you hit the cupola, which again is super, super unlikely. However, you need to be aware that at the top here, although that it is 60 mil thick now, so you're not going to get overmatched, you can still get shot in the face or in the forehead with heat. So for example, if a phase 1 is looking at you, doesn't really care too much. And you may think that this is now a weak spot, but because of the track being there, no one's really going to hit this because heat will just get absorbed by the track. So yeah, against heat, this tank is not very fun to play with, I won't lie, because the turret face and also the forehead. But honestly, it's such a nice tank to learn how to side scrape in that it's just a good all-rounder in that regard. It's not a good all-rounder with speed and stuff like that, but it's a good all-rounder for brawling in a heavy tank. So for the rating, we'll give this an 8 out of 10 again. Seems to be a common trend in this tank line. Yeah, this is a lovely vehicle. Obviously, it's not going to be a 10 out of 10 because it does suffer in the higher tiers, and also not only the higher tiers, but against heat in general, a lot like the VK452A does, but not as much because it's less likely to be seen. Whereas with this being tier 9, it is a lot more likely that you do get that high pen heat rounds being fired at you. So 8 out of 10. I think that's a good score to give it. And finally, for the tier 10, the Pz VII. Now, as I said at the start, this tank recently received a buff, and it went from being one of the more lackluster tier 10s. It wasn't like the worst of the worst, but it was a little bit worse for wear, to them being a lot more competitive. It's not OP, it's not a super dominant tank, but it's very good. And the main reason for that is that it did get buffed to the armor, which we'll move on to in a second, but it's this gun that really makes it shine. 560 alpha, 276 standard penetration, 325 premium penetration, 0.33 dispersion at 100 meters, good enough DPM, and very nice aim time. It's amazing how good this tank is. It has the highest standard pen of any heavy tank in the game with 276, as we mentioned, 560 alpha. But the thing is, usually with this type of alpha damage, you don't get very good dispersion. And it gets amazing dispersion at 0.32. And that when you go ahead and add all the crew skills on, and you use bounty stuff, because let's face it, we're at tier 10 now. We're going to use bounty hardening, turbo, and you guessed it, rammer. You now have 2,600 DPM, 0.3 accuracy, amazing aim time at 2 seconds, 38 top speed, 510 track health, and 450 meters view range. And the crazy thing is that once you go ahead and use all the field mods, you can pick the right-hand side field mod, and your track health is now 561. And all of this combined then means you have 2,920 hit points as well. So if you go ahead and you use all the field mods, this is what the tank ends up looking like. 40 top speed, you have very, very good track health, and importantly, that last field mod will actually increase your internal module durability, meaning that you don't get set on fire as often, which is a problem with this tank and getting its engine knocked out. And also your dispersion has gone down to 0.29 now. If you go ahead and look at the armor layout, you'll see that, yes, this tank still has its issues with the gun mantlet, but so does the VKK that is the same tank, but just with a big, fat 750 alpha damage with 350 heat. For all intents and purposes, this is exactly the same as the VKK, apart from two main differences. The gun, and also the side armor, because this tank gets a little bit weaker side armor below the turret than the VKK, and that's it. They are identical apart from that. But as we mentioned right here, you can get easily penned in the gun mantlet right here, and obviously in the side if you are trying to side scrape, which kind of you shouldn't do, but if you are, you can go right below here, right below where the turret ring ends and starts the hull armor. But the main thing that you want to do with this tank is actually bait the lower plate, because if you look head on, this lower plate is 260 millimeters thick, which means that if you're at an angle, you can make it do some very strange things, where it is now 300 millimeters thick, and they can't even shoot this either. So yes, you just bait your lower plate, you make them shoot it, it then bounces, you then go around the corner, you take the shot, you then do your damage, you then pull back, you rinse and repeat, and they will get very annoyed. It's great. The lower plate, you're never going to hit because it's an auto bounce for AP and APCR, and the upper plate is super, super thick, unless you come up against heat, which is a lot taller than you, and they can fire down. So the armor layout on this vehicle is really, really good. It doesn't really follow on from the VK4502B because you can't really side scrape in this tank. So everything that you learned in the previous vehicle doesn't really apply to this tank because it just can't side scrape. So, I mean, it can, but also can't. And it does have a cupola, although that is not very commonly hit unless you are rocking backwards and forwards, and then it could be hit. Anyway, as always, let's go and play a game in the Pz VII to wrap things up. Okay, so you join me on Ghost Town. Now, if you remember my last video in the Nurgle, where I've done my first impressions on it, I was saying how this is so small because I haven't changed my config on my mods. I still haven't changed it. One day I'll remember to change all my mods, but I forget. Anyway, we're in the Pz VII, obviously. We're on Ghost Town. We need to be a little bit careful on this corner from the BZ, because that is a bit of an issue. But the main thing is that it's a tier 9 game. So, and again, he's not going to pen that. This is pretty good for us because there's only 3 heavy tanks that are tier 10s. So that should mean that we can deal with them pretty easily. And because we're so tall as well... Oh, hello. Gun does not want to do the gunning right now. But because we're so tall, we can also see over this bit. So that will hopefully play into our favour here. There we go. One into him. A lovely 580. We don't need to worry about the Pz 75 either, because he's not really going to be much of a threat to our lower plate. Now, there is a tortoise there, which I kind of want him to peek, if we're being honest. Because that would be a lovely little bit of damage that can be done. I'm actually going to intuition quickly to APCR, because this guy will peek up. Doesn't go where we aimed it. The problem with that I'm going to face here is that I want to go forwards here where this Emil 2 is, but if I do that, I don't think... will we have people that would stop it from happening? I don't know. Let's push up. Let's risk it. You know what? This might not work, but it might work at the same time. So, one into him. No, the gun says no. We had to rush it because he was falling back so fast. But this Type 4 shouldn't be really any problem for us at all. And put one into him. This is what I was... this is the problem that I was facing. If this guy peeks. And unfortunately our team doesn't appear to want to do anything against them either. The Symbol 2 is actually doing more harm than good right now. And he's hitting everything, this Pz 75. Aim here. There we go. One into 60 TP. Very, very good. We just aim the lower plate, angle it. There we go. He hits the track. This guy is in the way again. And this guy, I mean, to be fair to him, he's rolling high on his pens. This Emil is actually more of a hindrance than help, though. Because he hasn't taken any damage, but he's making me take a lot of damage right now. Now, is this tortoise... You see what I mean? It's just so hard to play when this guy is doing this. Oh, please. One into his rear. We're still loading APCR, but it really won't matter, I don't think. Alright, let's see if we can have a nice little... He's going to be... Oh, man, why are you side-scraping in a mill? Alright, I mean, track him. Maybe we can get the Emil to shoot him now? Come on, you be useful, Emil. Why did that take so long? Oh, no, whatever, man. Oh. Anyway, I mean, the gameplay isn't honestly the point of this video. The gameplay is just an extra feature, so apply. Yeah, I mean, you know what? At least he done damage, okay? He done damage. He's probably grinding it. Hopefully he's done well, right? I really don't care. Right, it's not like I'm trying to mark the tank or anything, but it just shows you how annoying it can be sometimes when Like, if the Emil's on reload, just get out of the way. Like, just move out of the way, let other people play, and then you can come forward and be more of that supporting role in the game. And he probably would have got exactly the same amount of damage. But, I mean, that shows you that the armor of this tank is not insane, like as we've already seen, but you can bait a lot of your lower plate. However, if we have a look, it needs to be angled pretty well. We were not angling enough, and that is mainly because I didn't really know how far on the corner the Pz VII was. But look at these. But yeah, this one goes low, but this one I'm just not angled enough. So on these shots where, you know, I'm not angled, he's you know, it's going to be very hard to pen. Although with AP, he's not penning the lower plate anyway. So yeah, and even this, he bounces this. So he actually gets kind of unlucky that that did bounce, to be fair. But yeah, this tank is lovely. I mean, even in that game where it was a fast game, we didn't really have a lot of time, and it was by far not an optimal situation. We still got a decent amount of damage out of it. It should have been a bit more, but besides the point, it's still a very, very good tank. The gun is amazing. I think the whole line is pretty amazing besides the Tiger P. Is it worth it to grind it for you? Well, I mean, only you can really answer that, can't you? It is top of the tree, though, at the moment, so hopefully you did enjoy. If it was helpful in any sort of way, leave a like. I'll see you all in the next one.